G'day guys, Magnus the Red, and in today's episode we're going to be reviewing the Thousand Suns range for the Horus Heresy. So let's crack on with the first set of heads. We actually have quite a few heads to go through with the Thousand Suns Legion, which is, well, it's kind of in marked contrast to the other legions. Normally it's 1 to 2 sets of heads. We've kind of got about 4 to get through. 3 that are just helmets, and then 1 that's helmets, torsos, and some weapons. But anyway, this was the first lot of heads we got, and one of the distinct differences between the Thousand Suns and other legions is that there is no bare head present. In fact, there is no bare head in either of the 2 original sets of helmets that were released, which is kind of strange because every other legion did up to this point. Now, what do I think of them? I don't mind them, but the thing was, I bought, I'm going to say 60 of these heads, along with 2 boxes of Betrayal at Kelp when I built my original Thousand Suns for 2.0. Well, no, from 2.0. It was for when the Thousand Suns actually got their book in Horus Heresy. So I bought all this stuff back in 2016 in anticipation of the book releasing in February of 2017. So all of that went pretty well, but if I had the choice, I would not have bought these heads because I really like the ones in the middle row. I don't mind the bottom row, but I don't really like any of the top row because they don't really seem like Thousand Suns so much to me. I don't know, it just all had to do with the type of crest, the shape of crest on the head, that kind of thing. Instead, I much prefer the Achaean pattern. And yep, although they're all the same, uniformity is very much a thing amongst the Thousand Suns around the rank and file. There is a lot of uniformity as they almost lose somewhat of their personality when they become a member of the cults. So there's a thematic element that plays out here because it's like, well, as a member of the Thousand Suns, like you're a Pavoni cult, you're a Raptora cult, you're a Corvidae, everyone thinks alike in the same set of cults, and they very much believe in esotericism and having symbology. It's very important to them. The symbology in the real world is reflected by symbolism in the spiritual world. And so the Thousand Suns Legion has a lot of the same recurring motifs for this reason. And they go, okay, if I put this specific sigil here on my armor, it means exactly this. And so you see a lot of conformity there. And even the Sekhmet were known to be almost like automatons by Ferrus Manus. But knowing what Ferrus Manus is like, we sort of take that as a compliment. We assume that, no, he means that in a nice way, that they're very robotic and listen to orders and all of that sort of thing. But, so this is a rare instance where I say the more symmetry, the more alike the models are, the better. And I think the Achaean helmets are basically the best blend of the old Horus Heresy visions, artwork, and trading cards with the modern miniatures, and therefore this is my go-to for the helmets. Then we have the new Mark 6 helmets, which... So I have an inherent Mark 6 bias. I like the armor a lot, and I think there are some legions like Raven Guard, Alpha Legion who should have a lot of that armor. But on the whole, Heresy armor to me is a better fit for the Horus Heresy. Mark 6 is coming into use as the Heresy breaks out. And we're trying to be told that, hey, the Imperium that took, it took 150 years of the Great Crusade for them to basically start retiring Mark II armor. For 50 years, they've been using Mark IV armor, and now they're about to swap everything over to using Mark VI power armor. And they've done that in the space of a few years, and whilst the war is going on. Now, anyone who knows anything about logistics knows that that is not how anything works. And again, I always think of building my miniatures based on what story I'm trying to tell, and so I very much have this in mind. And when I look at these helmets, I think the Thousand Suns fought one major battle at the very beginning of the Horus Heresy, the Siege of Prospero, the burning of Prospero. A battle that lasted only a couple of hours and saw the Thousand Suns ambushed by the combined forces of the Space Wolves and the Legio Custodes and the Sisters of Silence. And because they were ambushed, the Primarch did not assist them in battle, whilst Valdor and Russ were both on the ground fighting on behalf of the other side. Well, we all know how that battle went, and even then, the Thousand Sons pretty much decimated the Space Wolves as a legion at the same time, no matter what Space Wolves players like to pretend. That's why the Space Wolves could not stand up to the Alpha Legion at the Alaxes Nebula battle that followed. Now, if the Thousand Sons lose that battle, how do they get out of there? Well, Magnus creates a warp portal and basically transports them to the planet Sororitas. Sorciaritas, however you want to pronounce it. I'm not good at the name, but it's the planet of the sorcerers, what eventually becomes the dark demonic mirror image of Prospero in Demon Space in the Eye of Terror. So if the Thousand Sons are there, where do they get all this Mark 6 power armor from? I know it was a long, convoluted way of getting to there in this story, but it makes no sense. And like I said, for me, I'm trying to tell a narrative. Maybe having a few of these helmets spread throughout, sure, why not? But an army of Mark 6000 Sons is not what I personally picture when it comes to the Thousand Sons. Mark 4 power armor, Mark 2 power armor, lots of Achaean pattern helmets and such. That is my traditional Thousand Sons. Then we normally do the elite units towards the end, and I do dreadnoughts first. I'm going to swap it around today. I'm going to bring the Khenetai occult to the forefront, because this offers us another set of heads and also torsos. Now, this is an upgrade set that goes with the Mark IV power armor. And unfortunately, they used to show a fully painted set of these miniatures and the armor on their website, but since they've removed that option, they just decided that just grey resin now is the best way to showcase the unit. I don't know why. It's just Forge World doing Forge World things. But what do we think of it? I like them a lot. They are basically taking the Achaean pattern helmet and just making it a little bit more grandiose. I don't really care for the sort of ears. They kind of remind me of Primaris ears on the top of the helmets here. But apart from that, these are nice helmets, and I think they look good on characters, especially lower tier characters, because it gives you that Egyptian head crest without going too over the top. The 40k designs, there are some bits there that I think are quite good for the Horus Heresy, but I don't tend to say, hey, just use a bunch of the 40k plastics, because they're just too stylized for what the Thousand Sons are at this point in time, especially with the giant head crests on them and the bolters that are etched full of weird runes. That's not really the Thousand Sons yet. I think using the 40k kits for, say, veteran units or command squad, something like that, yeah, perfectly acceptable, because they can be a bit more ornamented, a bit more ostentatious. But other than that, I think just the stock Mark IV with the Khenetai occult torsos and arms here put onto them, go for it. I also like that you get a decent number of weapons in here, because this is enough Khopesh weapons. You buy one set of these upgrades, $60. You have enough to do 10 units worth of Khenetai Khopesh swords on your characters and squad sergeants. So if you went for Achaean pattern helmets and then used these helmets and these weapons to mark out your sergeants, I think it's a really easy way to convert your Thousand Sons and get a really cool looking force out of them. Now, Khenetai occult as their own unit, they look good, but they suck on the tabletop, and there's no real way to make the sergeant distinctive in the squad. So you'll need to come up with some sort of way, whether through a Vexilia, or I changed the sergeant in my old Thousand Sons force to have a long Khopesh staff instead, just to mix it up a bit. Going on from there now, we get to the Sekhmet. Now, the Sekhmet are sort of unique amongst Terminators, because this is the first set of Legion Elite-specific Terminators that were cheaped out on. And how so? Well, they're basically just the Khopesh sword, the head, and the torso. The rest of them is just the plastic cataphracti Terminator. And Thousand Sons are one of the legions that is more unique than other legions. And especially when you start getting to the elite regiments, you should be seeing more more interesting visually stuff, okay? Hieroglyphics on the armor. And in the case of, say, like these leather straps, it would have been great to see like little scarab icons, like scarab buckle at the bottom of each leather strap, for example. You know, something like that. You look at how over the top Inner Circle Knights Cenobium are when the Dark Angels are, you know, they're closer to a standard quote-unquote legion than the Thousand Sons are. This is an entire legion of psychers here, master psychers, who are all in sync with one another, and I don't know, it's just, the thing I always come back to is you're trying to tell a narrative when you create these armies. You're not just painting the models or playing that faction because you think they look cool. Most of us get very engrossed in the faction and in the fluff and the background, and for Thousand Sons, as you can probably tell, I've been playing them since the mid-90s. In one form or another, I've been playing Tzeentch armies since the 90s. And this legion in particular is one that really needs that special touch, okay? Think about it. Most legions don't have these giant crests on their armor, okay? The closest you get is the corn bunny ears, which is mostly a 40k thing. In 30k, the Thousand Sons are the only ones who have that. What is that? What is that crest? And what is that crest that you see on all of these other guys? It's the psychic hood. It's mentioned in the stories that the Thousand Sons all have these psychic hoods, and that's what the Egyptian crest is. That's why it makes sense that everyone has one. It's not just an embellishment on the armor, it's actually a functioning piece of equipment on these particular Marines. And they talk about in the novels how their heads feel icy cold sometimes when they're using their powers because of the psychic hood. And it would have been great to see an actual full kit here, because, I mean, look at this image. How much of this kit is just stock Terminator? And it's not a bad thing if you want to convert, but if you look at what the Scarab Occult Terminators look like in 40k, I think that's much closer to what they should have done in 30k. You know, maybe the shoulder pads, for example, they could have gone for something that's, the trim on them could have been more Thousand Sons inspired, for example, and, you know, maybe a big scarab icon on the little Bessigure, little shoulder shield that many forces have, and yeah, but we'll get to some miniatures that have that shortly. The Thousand Sons Contemptor Dreadnought upgrade. Like all Contemptor Dreadnought upgrades, they don't work as individual torsos. They need the original body that goes with them, the shoulders and the legs, okay? And the Thousand Sons one is no exception. They had a fantastic Dreadnought, probably top 5, and it's wasted here. The only downside of these torsos, by the way, is if you put the Havoc launcher on the Thousand Sons torso, it looks like it's going to fire straight into the crested Egyptian headdress that's it's here, because there's a big missile launcher straight behind it. That never quite made sense to me. It would have been nice to have a missile that maybe shot through the center of it or shot over the top of it. It's one of those quirks of the design, but it was a lovely design once. It had little hieroglyphics and cartouches, especially, so it had these oval slots cut into the sides of the legs, the lower legs, that you could put hieroglyphics into, cartouche, which was really cool and very thematic. And now you don't have that. Then we have the Castellax-Achea. And this is what I was talking about, the Terminators. Imagine this sort of shoulder pad on the Sekhmet, okay, with a little scarab icon, little Legion numeral, Legion icon there, the Orobus. This would have been lovely to have on the Terminators, and even the weapons. If the bolt guns on the Terminators had have been combi bolters with this sort of eagle straddling them, something like, you know, add something a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more visually inspired. Or the trim on these, the way the trim is on the legs, the Castellax-Achea, imagine that instead of the stock cataphracti legs they got. What ifs, maybes, and could have beens, okay? I like the Sekhmet, but jeez. Castellax-Achea, though, I love these, and I especially love the Ether Fire Cannon. I think it's a beautiful design. Awful weapon on the tabletop. Not the greatest weapon last edition either. It was solid, but, you know, it was okay. It looks fantastic, and there are some awesome 3D STLs that people have done out there for Ether Fire weapons for vehicles, for infantry, all sorts. I wish the design was more, it was more viable on the tabletop so we could see more of it. But unfortunately, the rules for these things, are kind of lacking. They've got this awesome sort of crystal power pack in the back that's powering the weapon. The Castellax itself, instead of having the skull embedded into the torso, like the purely mechanical, these have that clear eye lens, this cyclopean eye, and this glowing source lighting. They've done this really suggests that, hey, this is a different thing. This is not your granddaddy's automata. And the crystal embedded into the back here, instead of just being an adamantic reactor, it has like a chakra crystal just thrown in there, Some hippie chick who doesn't shave in Byron Bay loves this miniature. It's aligning all of her chakras, and that's an Australian joke. People in Australia will get that. But yeah, I love these models. I had several of them. They were gorgeous in the army, and they're not very good on the tabletop this edition, but then Thousand Suns are terrible on the tabletop, so hey, use whatever you want in this Legion, because it's all bad. Then the Osiron dreadnought, which doesn't have a great place either on the tabletop this edition, just because the interaction of Achea force versus force is different. Now, I like the model, but it's extremely bloated with detail. The original Contemptor for the Thousand Suns struck a really nice balance. This thing goes a bit too far. The giant scarab on the front of the crutch with the cloak. The cloak is fine, but the giant scarab, I think, just overdoes that area. The head is fixed in place. There's no movement available to it at all. It's just rigidly fixed in place there like that. The, pearl strings coming down off the head crest, the Necron resurrection orb, all this sort of stuff. Visually, this is a very, very busy model, and I personally converted mine so that we sort of use these legs and arms on the regular Contemptor's torso. And it was a much more balanced looking miniature for it. So that is a conversion I suggest maybe a few of you try. Also, these little strips of fabric cloth running down across the chest, they're very fragile. So just be warned. The force weapon it's cool, but Gravis Power Fist is just better. So better bang for your buck. If you're taking these, you're taking them to shut down reactions, things like that. They're fine, they're passable, but if I had to choose between this model or the regular Legion Contemptor for the Thousand Suns, I'm definitely picking the other model. Then we get to our characters, and we only have a single Terminator. There is no power armored character for the Thousand Suns. Now, the Terminator character is good, but this comes from the time when they were sculpting these. Well, for a start, this is the candy red paint scheme. It requires airbrushing for the best results. When you candy red using, say, Tamiya Clear Red, it's kind of a pain painting over everything around the candy red afterwards, because it breaks down when you expose it to fluids, and it can it becomes wet again, and so it can contaminate the other colors you put over the top in the early stages, which is kind of frustrating. So you've got to paint all of the detail in this model, and even the clear red sections, by hand. That's kind of tedious, because they sculpted this with the head is fixed into place, the shoulders are fixed into place, everything about this model. It's sort of just one big chunk of resin that the elbows, where the two forearms are, they detach, and pretty much everything else is just a part of this model as delivered as like a single chunk of resin. As you can see here, it's just the top bit of the crest that actually comes off, and that is it. Okay, all the lower part, like the chest plate, crest, and all of that, yeah, that's fixed. So yeah, as a miniature, not the biggest fan of just painting this one because of that. It also suffers from this early set of chonky details with the cloaks. You can see there's no sleeve in it. It's just a flat, thick bit of resin. So is the cloaks that run between its legs and under its legs and all of that. So it's an optical illusion, and it works from angles like this, but when you turn it sideways, you can see it's just solid, thick chunks of resin. Not great. But on the whole, it looks good. Added, apart from the painting and assembly of this looks fantastic. It's a perfect Praetor for the Legion. It's just fiddly. And fiddly is a pain in the butt when you're painting these models. And we really need a power armored model because, like the Space Wolves, we've got a Terminator one. Now they've got a power armored one. Let's finish this off. Then we get to our special characters. So we start with Rat Boy here, Amon the Mandarin, and look at that cloak. This is what I was talking about thick, chunky details. Yeah, that is just a thick chunk of resin. It's not even hollow. It's just they sculpted what they wanted on one side of it for shape. They sculpted what they wanted on the other side for shape, and then they just filled the middle in with solid fabric. Not the greatest in the world. But Amon as a model is gorgeous. He is a pristine, beautiful Thousand Sun. The only thing I don't like is this little winglet. Didn't need it, didn't add anything to the model. They should have just not put it on there. It feels like an afterthought. They went, well, we've got to put something there. It feels like it's just too empty on that side. And they just slapped it on. Doesn't need it. Looks perfectly great. Fantastic even without it. The sort of crook-styled stave, where it's got this sort of like shepherd crook going on to it, is very Egyptian in styling. But yet, at the same time, science fiction, serpentine. The symbolism is great. The model is gorgeous, and he has a really nice display base too, with the sort of toppling pillars and the hieroglyphics. And yeah, I love the model. And the Ratman face, that's entirely the paint job. Whoever did this paint job, they did a nice job with like the tattoos and such, but the beard, the weird eyes and stuff, it's just all over the place. Don't judge it on that. Yeah, look, here's the bear head. It looks totally different when you see the actual bear head on Amon to the Rat Boy version of Amon that's as painted. No offense to the person who actually sculpted it. Gorgeous model, love it to bits. And then we get to this piece of shit. This is a terrible model. Terribly done and defended by people more insultingly because they went, well, it looks kind of like this old trading card artwork of Ahriman. Ahriman there's an image of him on the front cover of the Thousand Suns novel. He has a more Tutankhamun-esque sort of mask, and he's holding a crook, like I was just talking about, the shepherd's crook, in purple and gold. It looks really, really cool, and he's in like a stylized Mark IV. This is like a bastardized Mark VI with the fattest head on planet Earth, or in this case, the planet Prospero. Of all the characters you can pick, like the Space Wolf half, they created a new character, Geiger Fellhand, who is like has traits of Bjorn and is meant to be like Bjorn's company leader or whatever. Fine, cool. Create your own custom characters. Why couldn't this have been generic sorcerer number 12? Instead, they made it Ahriman. And Ahriman is one of the big four. Okay, big five if you think about it in special. You know, Khan, Lucius, Typhus, Ahriman, they're all uttered in the same breath. Why is Ahriman a horrible, monopose, weirdly scaled, statically posed piece of shit pumped out in the Burning of Prospero box? Are there good parts to this model? Yes. Are there parts that I went on to use elsewhere? Yeah, the cloak, for instance. The cloak is decent. The backpack is decent. The stave is decent enough on its own. It's the rest of the model, though, the actual body, that's horrible. He is short. He is fat. He looks like someone took a really nice model and, you know, in like 3 dimensions, like an image, and they just compressed it vertically down. So they didn't make it any thinner in the X and Y axes. They only compressed the Z axis. I hate this model. I loathe this model. All the other characters had these awesome, like, miniatures produced for them in resin over at Forge World, with scenic display bases. And we get Amon, who is a decent model. But that's the treatment we could have gotten for Ahriman. And instead, Games Workshop in their infinite fucking wisdom gave us this. No, I hate this model. I just don't want to talk about it anymore. It makes me angry. And I only included it. I didn't include Dominion Zephon in the Blood Angels video because it would have gone very similar to this. It's just the disgraceful display of representing the character. Ahriman is the most beloved Thousand Sons character. And they ruined him out of corporate greed in slamming him into the box. This could have just been any generic sorcerer. No one would have cared. They would have gone, oh, that's pretty neat. But they had to make it Ahriman because they wanted that name to cash in on sales. Fuck them. I like this Primarch. It's not in my top 5. I think they did a really nice job of it, but the minute you've got things like the arcing warp energy floating around the base, I think no matter who sculpts it, no matter how good a job they do, like Simon Egan, brilliant sculptor, it's still horrible sculpted effects, and it looks exactly like that. I don't like it. I didn't include any of that on my Magnus model when I built it because I hate them so much. Now, as a model, he looks good, but I really do wish he had the nipple horns. The classic artwork always had these 2 horns coming out of the chest, and yeah, they were silly, they were campy, but you've got a giant red Cyclops using psychic powers with ivory horns on the back of his armor anyway. Look, at this point, just go all out and give him the chest horns. Like, you're already a level of absurd here, so what does it matter? Design-wise, yep, it's gorgeous, it's a Primarch, but just solidly into the mid-tier. And his arms almost feel a little bit skinny for the body. I mean, I get it, they are bare exposed arms. They're going to look thinner, slimmer, because the body has armor on it. But I feel like maybe around the biceps or deltoids, he should have been just bulked up just a little bit more, like 5% bigger, just to give him a bit better proportions and balance. Because now he comes with this really tiny face, really tiny arms, and then the hair makes up for the rest. The weapon, the Blade of Unintro, looks great. I love the cloak on Magnus. That is, yeah, it's just Magnus. You just look at it and you think, yeah, these sort of almost what would you call those feathers? Like a tropical peacock style. Looks great. The cloak having sort of like, it looks like a woven Egyptian fabric. Yeah, great, you know. But it comes with some sick bath towels, and these little strips of cloth that come down over the shoulders, they look fantastic. They look absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, Magnus is a beautiful Primarch, but doesn't make my top 5 for those listed reasons. Just personal pet peeves. But yeah, a gorgeous model, and I do love it. They did justice to it. It just could have been a little bit better. And hey, like I said, all the Primarch sculpts, as I've said in previous videos, are all fantastic sculpts. Some are just better than others, and there are others that I would rate above Magnus when it comes to Primarch sculpts. And you've seen a few of them so far, like Ferrus Manus, Angron, okay, the Lion. They're all up there when it comes to really, really nice Primarchs. But I personally feel the best is yet to come. Anyway, that's it for the Thousand Sons. Let's just pretend that this model never exists and you just make your own, okay? So just please, just make your own. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle, avid Thousand Sons fanboy of 30 years. I should seek help, but, well, this edition, the Thousand Sons need a lot more help than I do, so let's just give it to them first. See you all in the next video.